removed subsidies for cooking oil, which were previously provided to producers to help lower cooking oil prices. The Indonesian Ministry of Industry stated that the subsidy scheme was removed, claiming that cooking oil prices have begun to drop. In replacement of the subsidy scheme, the government have enforced a domestic market obligation in which cooking oil companies must provide 10 million tons of cooking oil to the domestic market every year, essentially to ensure enough domestic supply of cooking oil to keep prices lower. Furthermore, instead of providing subsidies, the government will also offer export quotas to cooking oil companies and producers. Now, despite removing the subsidy scheme, the price of cooking oil in many parts of Indonesia is still well above the government price cap. On the 31st of May, the average price of cooking oil in Indonesia was 18,300 rupiah per kilogram. This is still around 19% higher than the government price cap of 15,500 rupiah per kilogram. While policies surrounding cooking oil in Indonesia have been changing frequently, prices still remain unstable. But what impact will the removal of cooking oil subsidies have? We are joined by Bhima Yudhistira, the Director of Economic and Law Studies Center think tank Celios. Bhima, thank you so much for joining us today again on Jakarta Movers and Shakers.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Right, so as we saw just now, the price of cooking oil was still high. National average is 18,300 rupiah per kilo. Now, we know that the government have introduced other programs such as the domestic market obligation, but now they have removed the subsidies to producers. Do you fear that cooking oil prices will still surge after the removal of these subsidies, Bhima?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The price will goes up, surge again. It's not significant, but it will be very, very difficult to reduce the cooking oil price. One factor, the problem is not about the supply, because the DMO objective is to increase the supply. Meanwhile, after the government using the banning of the CPO export lately, it's been like 3 weeks, the government banning the CPO export. There's been like a lot of RBD lane or raw materials of the cooking oil available right now. And it's sufficient for the next month supply. So the problem is not about the supply of the CPO, the supply of the cooking oil. The problem is about the distribution. So if the government try to decrease the price of the cooking oil with their use standard of 14,000 rupiah per liter, so the government need to intervene more in the distribution. And the second thing is, even though the Lebaran already passed, because the peak of the cooking oil demand seasonally is during the Ramadan and Eid Mubarak or Lebaran. And Lebaran is already passed, so the demand is eased right now, but the problem of the cooking oil is still persists. So we see that demand is not picked up, but the price of the cooking oil is still high. So there is something wrong on it. It's not about the supply and demand again, because the producer of the cooking oil led the increase of the cooking oil globally. So they set up the price domestically with the basis of the international price. That's the problem. So the disparity between the international price and domestic price create a huge gap. So if the producer of the cooking oil try to sell below the minimum price price ceilings of the cooking oil, it's very, very hard for them, because a lot of the revenue will be lost. This is the problem, because 95% of the total distribution of the cooking oil is held by the private sectors, not held by the government sectors, or bulk intervention is absolutely important right now.
All right. Before we get into the intervention of Bulog, the Indonesian Bureau of Logistics, I just want you maybe to explain to people out there outside of Indonesia looking in, because Indonesia is, one of the, if not the largest producer of palm oil in the world. So it is rather confusing as to why Indonesia cannot keep cooking oil prices low. So you were talking about distribution just now. Just maybe explain a little bit more. What is it about distribution in Indonesia that is maybe not as effective, that is making cooking oil prices so high in a country that can produce many or very much a high supply of cooking oil, Bhima?
So there is actually two factors we're talking about the distribution of the cooking oil. The first one is, if we're talking about the bulk cooking oil, it takes more than 5 points to 7 points of the distribution channels. So from the producer of the cooking oil through the traditional market, through the informal market, for instance. So it takes a lot of distribution channels, and each of the distributors gain margin, profit. And then there is a problem because the bulk cooking oil, the monitoring, the policy to ensure that the same exact size of the cooking oil delivered to the end of the consumers is the same size that the producer of the cooking oil produce. So there is a huge gap when there is a distribution problem and the margin of each distribution channel is so high, so it's very hard to keep the cooking oil price down. And the second one is, the problem is Indonesia is one of the largest plantation of the palm oil. That's everybody know and understand about that. But the huge problem is the market is dominated by several players, and there are several players controlling not only the plantation of the CPO or the palm oil, but also they're controlling until the distributors. So when the government pushes the distributor to increase supply so the consumer get the proper price of the cooking oil and also stock available for the traditional market, the real problem is the producers and distributor, which is the same company, they tend to increase the supply and set the lower price for their own industry. For instance, they also have a noodle industry that needs a lot of cooking oil. So the market is not healthy. This is not a fair competition. So when the market is failure, the government need to intervene. So that's two things that make very hard to decrease the cooking oil, especially the bulk cooking oil.
Right. And of course, like you said, the Indonesian government needs to step in more. You're talking about the Indonesian Bureau of Logistics. They are reportedly going to be tasked with distributing cooking oil. I mean, it seems that, distribution has been the problem. So first of all, can you just tell us about how this will help, if the Indonesian Bureau of Logistics will help with distribution? Because as you said, there is a disparity between the low price cap set by the government and the prices abroad. So companies will be losing some money there. So will there be kind of tension between the Indonesian Bureau of Logistics and these companies? Will it be effective? But also another way of looking at it is maybe the government should have been doing this a long time ago, distributing from a state company. So just tell us more about that.
Yeah, actually, you're right, because it's a little bit too late that the government intervened, for instance, in the distribution, let alone the problem of the supply, because some of the state-owned enterprise, they also have plantation of the CPO or palm oil, but it's very, very limited. So the intervention in the distribution channel, it should be held a long, long time before the crisis of the cooking oil happened. So Bulog is already got permit from the government. We see many regulations support Bulog action, especially the 2016 presidential mandate, that Bulog need to step in not only for the rice price stabilization. The problem right now is Bulog only do stability in some of the commodity, excluding the cooking oil, because the cooking oil is not part of the Bulog main commodity. But Bulog actually can intervene when the commodity like a cooking oil, that everyone needs cooking oil, and this is basic raw materials for any ingredients of the food and beverage industry also. So the Bulog can intervene. First, Bulog can set the fair price. They can buy as many as possible cooking oil from the producer with a fair price, and then Bulog can monitor from every endpoint to the consumer's level how many margin of the distribution that Bulog want to gain from this cooking oil business. So actually it is more transparent, it's more accountable, and the government, if they provide subsidies to the bulk cooking oil, it's easier to control if the Bulog is give a lot of permits to handle the distribution. So I think this is a correct move, even though a little bit too late, but it's better late than never. Better late than Bulog is not intervene at all. So I think it's a good move. So we will see soon how Bulog can handle how many percentage of the total distribution. Hopefully 85% minimum intervention in the distribution, especially for bulk cooking oil.
Okay, right. And you said it's better late than never, but as we know right now, also the police and the armed forces are kind of joining in to be involved to monitor cooking oil in the markets. We're going to talk more about that right after the break. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned to Jakarta Movers and Shakers.
Ya, kita harapkan dalam seperti keinginan Presiden dalam 2 minggu ke depan mesti ada bagus satu. Jadi distribusi sampai kepada pengecer itu kita tidak boleh ada yang mengaco di tengah. Jadi itu sudah penting. Saya sudah minta seperti Kapolres tadi Pak Hardi sini, dia dengan Ibu Bupati itu sama-sama dengan nanti Kodim, Polres, Kodim Polres dengan Ramil semua itu harus bekerja sama. Jadi tidak boleh. Jadi harga tadi dia sampai 13.000 di pengecer ya sudah dia bisa jual 14.000. Jumlah.
All right, if you're just joining us, we're still joined by Bhima Yudhistira, director of the Celios Think Tank. Now, Bhima, as we heard just now, the Indonesian Minister of Maritime Investment, Luhut Panjaitan, saying that the police and armed forces are being involved in monitoring cooking oil prices in Indonesia. Do you think this move is effective?
Yeah, I think every law enforcement should be available to support government intervention to ensure the distribution is smooth. There is no players, there is no criminals or organized crimes try to manipulate the price of the cooking oil. I think we need to support that one. But the problem is sometimes when the government try to controlling the distribution, is happen only like we call it sidak, yeah. We call it like a instant coming to the traditional market with the police uniforms, try to asking the traditional sellers of the cooking oil, where you get this price, why your price is above the harga eceran tertinggi or above the price flooring of the government regulations. So this is create another level of fears with the traditional market sellers. So they think that if they sell cooking oil above the government price limits, there will be like a penalty, there will be like a consequence, law consequences, regulation consequences. So I think this is creating the atmosphere which is not fair. Even though some of the small players try to get margin higher rather than the normal average of the distribution margin. But the main problem, as we see from Pak Luhut's statement, so the main problem is between the producers of the cooking oil until the traditional market sellers. There's a lot of distribution channels that need to be controlled. This is the big players, the first distributors in the provincial level, the second distributor in the regional level or kabupaten kota or cities levels. So this need to be monitored as well. The police need to ensure that every single distribution point is not manipulate the price of the cooking oil. And I think this is very, very expensive law enforcement, very, very expensive law enforcement. So instead of using only single law enforcement, like going to the traditional market to check the price, I think the government should reform the control system of the cooking oil since the producers of the cooking oil itself.
Okay.
But this is also a problem because the cooking oil, which is bulk cooking oil, is very hard to control compared with the simple packaging of the cooking oil. That's why I'm adding one more, that Malaysia government, they prefer to have a subsidize for the poor family through the simple packaging cooking oil. They don't have bulk cooking oil like Indonesia did.
Right. So are you saying that the subsidy scheme should remain, but it should change a bit, not for bulk cooking oil, but for package? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
Right.
we need to move from the bulk cooking oil subsidies to simple packaging cooking oil.
Right, because beforehand you said that you're fearful, not just you, but vendors are fearful that now the subsidies are removed, cooking oil prices could go up again. So it's very volatile. These policies are being removed, the prices go up again, and there's new policies. But I also want to ask you about the Minister of Trade who launched the program Migor Rakyat, or cooking oil for the people, which will distribute low-price cooking oil at 10,000 spots. The transactions are being done using digital apps. Do you think this is a good move?
Yeah, I think they try to solving the high price of the cooking oil. But I see it in a different way, in the criticized perspective, that when you're buying cooking oil through the apps and you're buying it from the traditional or informal sellers, so it's very hard to verify. And then we see that the one that needs low price of the cooking oil is small, medium enterprise. And they also poor family, which is lack of internet connectivity.
Right.
So if they try to buy cooking oil, they need to download the apps, and also the sellers in the traditional market need to download the apps. It's also creating another verification, validation problems. And even when they try to bring their electronic identification card, I think it's very hard for the sellers in the traditional market to verify, is it correct or valid ID, for instance, or just a fake ID card.
Okay.
So I think it's create another problem.
Right. So the problem seems to be very complex. But as we were talking about as well, the Indonesian Bureau of Logistics could step in. They're going to handle the distribution. So hopefully, when that time comes, cooking oil prices, the problem will start to subside in Indonesia. Bhima Yudhistira, the director of the Celios Think Tank, thank you so much for joining us today at Jakarta Movers and Shakers.
Yeah, thank you.